Right, so thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the intro, and it's really nice to be here. Where was I going to start? I can't remember. I don't come from anywhere, so I have a very ambivalent sort of sense of place. Not unfortunately, because I'm part of the Euro elite. Oh, do you want your phone? Okay, thanks. Oh, I've got mine. It's keeping me to time too. Not because I'm part of the Euro elite who move from place to place, but because I'm an army brat. So I grew up in the army, and so I'm a person from nowhere, which means that the news of this morning has come as a great disappointment to me. Some of you might not remember the very pointed speech about people from nowhere not being able to. Some of us do. Yes, I took it very personally, and I do come from somewhere. But it's not necessarily always in the same place. I get a strong sense of place in different environments. And in that course of growing up, everybody's been confessional so far about where they come from. And after I left home and went to university, my parents moved to Welwyn Garden City, which is part of the Garden City movement, which brings me full circle back to Otterpool. I have no happy memories of Welwyn Garden City at all. I don't have many memories at all of Welwyn Garden City, but the ones I have were not particularly positive. That does not reflect, I think, on Welwyn Garden City. It reflects on a time in your life when your parents move and you're from university and you go back there, and it's a very alienating experience. Though I do remember the inside of the photocopying machine in Rank Xerox's factory very well. So I am, hold on, this is going to be, no, this, I've now covered the keyboard with all my stuff, so there we go. So I'm from Creative Folkston, and we're going to talk briefly about Otterpool. So Otterpool, I'm giving you a map so you can find out where Folkston is. That's over there. We're obviously in relationship to London, because where else would you need to know where anything is? Referencing earlier speakers. And then in reference to Folkston, Otterpool is, and if I had a pointer, I could point it out. But it's if that's Folkston there, and that's Hyde there, around where it says Westinghanger, down this bit here is going to be built 8,000 homes, and 30,000 people are going to live there. So to give context, Folkston is 3 or 4 miles away. That's got 60,000 people in it. Hyde's got 20,000, and then they're going to build a town with 30,000 on it. So it's going to take you slightly over the 100,000 as a conurbation if you take them as one entity. Our background is Creative Folkston was set up 16 years ago. And I'm just going to walk right straight through the difficult territory of definitions. We were set up, if I had the bravery to say we were as a placemaking charity, because we were in Folkston, which was a town that had pretty much lost its economic purpose. It had 2, tourism and a port, and the tunnel killed the port, and everyone went to Spain. And we were set up to see what we could do. The first thing we did was establish a creative quarter. We've got 90 buildings in here which are for and can only be used for creative purposes or for education, though we do feed people and give them drinks as well, because that's what a community needs. We then established a venue. So this is Quarter House on your left. It's a performance space, do dance, theatre, music, and other things. So, and comedy and family workshops, pretty much everything you can imagine. It's a 250-seater, 500 standing, and also we've got workspaces up the top. So, and then we established the Folkston Triennial, which is it's the largest exhibition in the country, or recurring exhibition of newly commissioned work. So it's about 20 new pieces by artists, internationally renowned to some local artists, and all points in between. And this is Lubena Himid's piece from the last triennial in 2017. This, as well as being a really great exhibition, there was no doubt that this was designed in order to bring attention to town and to change the narrative. We were in a very negative spiral. If a place is in decline, that most of the talk about it is negative. And so is there any way you can change the story? So the triennials helped us with that. We also have a book festival that we actually inherited from a previous organisation. So it was set up in 1980. and it's one of the oldest book festivals in the country. And we purposefully position that in the autumn, so in November, because the feeling is if you live in a seaside town, you get a lot of visitors during the year. But what do you do in the winter? And you come together and you discuss things and you have ideas and see what you think about them. So it's a space for thinking and discussing and talking pretty much amongst the community, gathering around the winter fires. And then we have an extensive learning engagement program working with schools, working outside school environments. This is a drop-in workshop we run every other Saturday, and we do tech workshops as well, looking at creative tech. And there's a dance group and there's music every Saturday morning and so on. The things you'd expect. And then lastly, and this is very much lastly, this is the Folkston Artworks, which is a collection now of 70 pieces of contemporary art in the town, which they were pieces commissioned for the Triennial initially, but they now create its own exhibition where you can really go and understand the town. The artists are considering the environment they're in and responding to it, both its history and its geography, and its currentness and future. So this is a piece called Siren, and it faces out over the cliffs towards Europe, but we used to have listening ears where you could, during the Second World War, before the Second World War, they built listening ears before radar was invented, where you could capture noise of planes arriving. And now we've turned it so we can actually shout out to Europe, as we are the closest place to them. The reason the Artworks was the last was because the thinking behind what we were doing was very much about a production-led model of how you tackle a town that we wish to regenerate, in that it wasn't about building a building that people came to consume and then enjoy the benefit. It was in the first instance making it a place to work and to live, and then obviously with the education to study, and with the Quarter House to be playful. So all of those, you get them right, and then you get a collection at the end, and it's a place to visit. Has it been a success? I think there's many measures of success. There's also measures of failure. But one of the most interesting for us in context of this is that the district council was called Shetway District Council, and they changed their name to Folkston and Hythe District Council. Because no one knew where Shetway was, but because people knew where Folkston was. But also they couldn't do it until, and we're 16 years into this project, they couldn't do it until people in the surrounding area were prepared to associate with Folkston, because it was the place that people wouldn't go to. If you came from Hythe, it was way too rough to go to Folkston. And so they waited and realized that actually the new identity around creativity was something that they were really interested in. So they changed their name, and we were set up as Creative Foundation, and we changed our name too to Creative Folkston. Perhaps in part because there's a bigger district there that we could then play with, and that is our place, the bigger district. So that's our story. And Otterpool Park came along. We were asked, the council, very, very clever, if you like that sort of thing, bought a lot of land. Having turned down planning permission on a racecourse, they then went and bought the land around it at agricultural prices, and then went back to the people who owned the racecourse and said, shall we develop a new town here? And went to the government, who were looking at the Green Towning Initiative. We were just asked whether we would write a letter of support, so we wrote a letter of support. We don't have a view as an institution about whether they should build a new town. It's not up to us, really. But what we did say is, if this is going to be built, we do feel there should be standards of design and community engagement and art and culture and so on. So we wrote that letter of support, and then the council came to us and said, thank you for doing that. A bit later, we now got some traction with the government. That was the letter to government. Government support us. Could you help us and write a cultural vision, and then from that, cultural strategy, and that will go into the planning application. That went in February of this year. So we really are early. Nothing's been built, nothing's been done. There's a master plan, but there's no building design or anything like that. And so it's going to be a while before anything starts. We said yes, we would do that, in part around this sense of connectedness. The conversations, luckily, were very much around this is going to be part of a greater sense of Folkston. We don't think we're going to go in and build infrastructure. You've got cultural infrastructure, so you know these people are going to be an audience. We do not want to build this town around an identity, around creativity. We want it to be different to that, but we want it to be connected with the area. You're the experts on culture and placemaking within this town. Could you help us? And we said yes, with the reticence that we're not consultants who do this sort of work. So we took it on and commissioned Peter Jenkinson to write the vision. And I was just going to read, I'm going to just offend a few people in the room here, because it starts by saying, this, I'm just going to read a bit. It said, Otterpool will be the best new town in and for the UK. There's many ways of being the best town in the UK. So I'm not taking your space. You can have it too, Mark. That was the first thing. It will be a great place to live and work and come together. And its success, it will have a soul. It will need to develop its own identities, its own values, its own traditions, its own customs, and its own culture. It will be a deeply human experience, an open, vibrant, confident, inclusive, creative community. The culture and creativity will be vital in making Otterpool distinct and authentic. And it ends again with this place will have a soul. So that was quite ambitious. And the reason we wrote something ambitious in part was because we were asked to. And we were asked in part by the executive, the officers of the council to do this because they were feeling, even though they'd got a long way through and they'd got most of the master plan, there was something missing at the heart of it, which was where was the vision for this town? Where was it going to come from? And who was going to be able to position the politicians in the right space? Because I think they were finding it difficult to make a mark about what Otterpool would be. It's got some really great attributes because of the way it's been bought. It's going to be 50% green space. It's going to hit high standards of affordability, affordable housing, really nice design standards. But really trying to tie it together into something, I think, was a challenge to them, and they wanted us to challenge the politicians in a sense. And we did that. And there was a bit of pushback, but not much, actually. And so it went through. And now we have to write, or they've asked us to write, 36-month action plan. What are we actually going to do in there? How are we going to start to deliver that vision through actions before housing is built? So it's quite an exciting proposition. A couple of things have happened that I've noticed. One is that they've now published Otterpool Park, and I'm looking forward to the academics' presentation in 2075. When they critique the illustration here and the font. I have to say the fonts were so much better in the Newtown movement. I really don't think that anybody's going to go there. But there's an advantage to this. There's a real advantage which I'm going to come to. But what fascinated me is we wrote this, and then this came back and said, "Are you happy with the design?" And it said, "Countryside connected creative." It did not say creative when we started. There was no creativity in the vision when we started, and it's in there. And we didn't ask for it, and I'm slightly ambivalent about that because we said that wasn't going to be our identity. But on the other hand, there we are. And then I went to a public event last week in which they were doing some more consultation. And I think I've got 2 slides. So this one says, it's going to be designed with culture and creativity at its core, reflecting its natural character and heritage. I'm really thrilled. And then here it says, we will work with Creative Folkston. I did not sign that off. That was put in there. And that's fascinating. So all I've done is explain the process, which I think you asked me to do, Sarah, and then you asked me to some points of learning. I think one of the points of learning that I've had, so this is personal, this is just my personal experience, is what's fascinating is that we don't have good fonts. And by that I mean there is no vision for this set of new house building. There is no vision. There is no utopia. There is no sense of going. This has a great advantage because you're not going to fail to hit it. Yeah, that's one thing. And so therefore we don't have to go down before we go up. Yeah, and reassess. But I think it's also very problematic and very interesting. The reason there's no vision is because there's no political ability, this is my judgment, ability to put a vision on it, because house building is politically so contentious. There's not a political party that is not talking about house building as an absolute necessity, and there's not a single politician who's prepared to stand up and tell you where they're going to build a house and how they're going to do it. And they don't have a vision. And who filled the vision? We filled the vision. And I'm about to get shot down, because that's what's going to happen. And so I think it's interesting. There's a space for us to command and to help and to do something that intrinsically from our core we wish to do because we believe it's important. But what's it going to do to us? There you go. Nice. There you are. And so I learned that. I learned that, having talked to Nick Sirota, nobody's going to build, you're not going to get any money for any large-scale buildings. That was quite interesting and actually fitted our vision of it anyway, because we're going to provide the formal cultural infrastructure before the town is built. And then 10 years, 15 years down the line, when they've got 20,000 people, they will have a sense of identity. Then they can decide what infrastructure they build, rather than planning the infrastructure in at the beginning, the cultural infrastructure. So that was interesting. It's really important to get in early because we're in there before anything happens. That's helpful. And connectedness. I think the sense of this town, or the other advantages of not having a vision, is the vision is about connectedness to the towns around it. I think that has a value, that is important because it's not trying to only be judged against itself. It's being, and the community that move in there are not only going to be of that one, I know it's rough use of the word community, but you know, that community or communities or multiple communities are not only going to be judged about that town, they're going to be judged within a context. And the last point I was going to make is, I think this is for other people in the cultural sector, not the consultants who probably know this, but the institutions like us. We have a huge value and we probably don't realize it. And I certainly was way too cheap. Thank you very much.